Hey guys. All right. We're going to read chapter 7, Raising the Flag, March 25th, 1944. June was having a conniption. You're pulling too hard, she complained. Mom tugged another hank of June's wet hair around her finger and secured it with a bobby pin. Don't you want to look your best tomorrow? June's lower lip poked out. I think I'd look my best in a plain old ponytail, she waggled at Kitty. Kitty thinks so too. Obie turned around, turned another page in his comic he'd traded with Max. Miss Milner, the school librarian, was a sport, letting Hobie and Max read in the library during rainy day recesses. Other kids had started bringing in their comics too, and Miss Milner was talking about starting a club. Hobie didn't want a club, he just wanted to read comics. Ouch, June hollered. Aren't you done yet? Almost, said Mom, but she'd been saying that for a half an hour. Hobie was glad that all he'd needed to do was make sure his shoes were shined. Mom had even let him use Dad's brushes. This was the second year Dad would miss the blessing of the fleet. The Hansons never missed. There was even a photograph in the family album of brand new baby June, there on the docks. Ever since Every year since 1929, in late March, all the fishermen and their families would gather at Fisherman's Terminal, and every year Pastor Havoc would choose one boat to represent the entire fleet, and he'd bless that boat. This year he'd picked the Lily Bess. How do those shoes look? Mom asked, twisting another curl around her finger. Hobie set down the comic and held them up for her to see. Dad couldn't have done a better job, she said. I've ironed your white shirt and laid out your tie. Tie? He choked to death. Tie, said Mom firmly. Hobie sighed, but not too loudly. At least he'd only have to wear the tie for a few hours. June was going to have to sleep all night on those pokey bobby pins. Is that someone at the door? Mom asked. Go see. Hobie scrambled up. A huge man filled the doorway. Just making sure you're going to be there tomorrow, said Uncle Trig. He carried a box under his good arm. When he stepped aside, he held it out to Hobie. I got one of these for my boys, Uncle Trig said, meaning Hobie's cousins Emil and Eric. They don't have the patience, but I thought you might. He handed Hobie a blue box stamped Official Air Scout Spotter Models. 25 cents, B-24, the Liberator. Dad's plane. Hobie ran his hands over the box. June's lower lip stuck out even further. What did you bring me? My little pickled herring, Uncle Trig said. You don't think your favorite uncle would come empty handed, do you? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a brand new jump rope with colored handles. Oh, thank you. June tried to reach for it, but Mom tugged her back down. We're not done here, Mom said, fussing with the pin curl that had come loose. But I want to try out my new jump rope, said June. Not after I've gone to all this work on your hair, said Mom. You can jump rope after the ceremony tomorrow. That's too long, June wailed. Uncle Trig patted his overcoat pocket. I may have something that will sweeten the wait. He handed June a roll of citrus fruit drops. She tore it open and popped one in her mouth. What do you say? Mom asked. Thank you. June smacked on her candy. Do you want one? She offered the roll first to Mom and then to Uncle Trig. I'll take one, said Hobie. June made a face. June, said Mom. Oh, all right. June peeled the paper roll down farther by passing a cherry drop. Here, she handed Hobie the green one. I don't like this flavor. Oh, gee, thanks. Hobie popped the candy in his mouth. Then he studied the cover of the model box. This looks well. Thanks, Uncle Trig. Mom came back from the kitchen with a cup of coffee and handed it to Uncle Trig. Hobie flipped the box around and read the back. A red, white, and blue message caught his eye. Boys, you can help win the war. Hobie leaned closer. Sorry about that. Um, Hobie leaned closer and read the fine print. Thousands of model aircraft are needed to train Navy, Army, and civil defense groups. Block Hitler. Build a plane. You could help it, Uncle Trig said, shrugging off his overcoat, or donate it to the military. They're using them to train folks to look for certain plane silhouettes, he added. Hobie hefted the box. I don't get it. How could a model help the Army? Uncle Trig lifted his coffee cup high over Hobie's head. If you hung that model on the ceiling, it would look like a B-24 flying about a mile up. Nifty. Hobie decided right then. He would donate it when he finished to do his part. You'll need some black paint, said Uncle Trig. But I thought your dad might have some in the basement. Would you like something to go with that coffee? Mom asked. I'm done here. She stretched a hairnet over June's head full of crisscross bobby pins. You can go play now, Mom said, but no jump roping. The coffee hit the spot. Uncle Trig sat down. his empty cup. I best be on my way. See you tomorrow. As soon as he left, Hobie ran to the basement. There was a small can of black on the back of Dad's workbench. He ran back upstairs. I'll be in my room, Mom, he called. He carefully opened the model box with his pocket knife and read the instructions twice. His bedroom door creaked open. What you doing? June asked. She looked like some kind of space creature with those pins all over her head. Nothing. Hobie picked up a piece. Was that the right wing or the left wing? Can I help? June bumped his elbow. No. Hobie pushed her away. But I heard you and Uncle Trig. This is Daddy's plane. She patted the box as if it were a pet, as if it were a duke. Hobie sighed. Okay, you can help. But you have to do exactly what I tell you. He set the pieces out on the desk. Some of them need to be pushed out of the way. Sorry, punched out of thin wood frame. But they looked so flimsy and breakable. Hobie picked them up and set them down again. I could punch them out, June offered. I have lots of practice with paper dolls. Hobie hesitated, but her fingers were smaller than his, and she did have a lot of paper dolls. He handed over the piece of wood, and June gently pressed out the first piece. See, she said, piece of cake. Want me to do the rest? Hobie handed Hobie's hand poised over the other pieces, then pushed them over. June finished the task while he started arranging the bigger pieces for the assembly. By the time they left for the blessing of the fleet on Sunday morning, bundled up against the cold March morning, both wings were sanded as smooth as Mom's fancy silk scarf. Hobie planned to glue them on that afternoon. Mom, June, and Hobie made their way through the crowds, down the dock, passing boat after boat, breathing deep of salt and fish. Over here, Aunt Ellen called, waving a handkerchief. Mom took June's hand, and shivering in the raw air, they hurried to stand with Aunt Ellen. You'll come over after for coffee, Aunt Ellen said to Mom. Of course, Mom answered. Hobie tried not to groan. He had hoped to work on the model that afternoon. Coffee at Aunt Ellen's would turn into a pinochle game for the grown-ups and then supper. It always did. Who knew when they'd get home? There's my boy. Uncle Trig came over and scooped Hobie in a bear hug. He turned to June. And who is this movie star with you? He asked. June giggled, making her pin curls bounce. This it's me, Uncle Trig, June. No, Uncle Trig looked very thoughtful. Not Shirley Temple. June giggled again. May I borrow your brother, fair maiden? Uncle Trig asked. I promised to bring him back. You may, June answered like a princess, curtsy and all. Come with me, young man. Uncle Trig put his good arm around Hobie's shoulder. The boys and I decided there was only one person to hoist the flag today. He tapped Hobie. Hobie hesitated. Are you sure? He tugged at his necktie. It's a pretty big deal. Seems like you should do it. Palmer would do the honors if he were here, being the oldest. Emil and Eric are scuffling on the dock, said Uncle Trig as he stepped over to separate them. He started it, Emil said. Said Eric. Stow it, grumbled Uncle Trig. Oh, hello, Pastor. He greeted Pastor Havoc, whose long nose was as red as the scarf wrapped around his neck. God bless Trig. Pastor Havoc shook hands with all the Hanson crew. Then he pulled a small purple flag from his pocket. I remember your father when he was your age, the pastor said to Hobie, handing him the flag. He and Trig were like those two. He tilted his head toward Eric and Emil. It's a wonder your grandfather had any hair at all with the trouble they gave him. Hobie glanced over at his cousins. Emil sneaked a punch in Eric's arms. Eric's shoe landed on top of Emil's foot. He had a hard time picturing Dad and Uncle Trig acting like that. Let us pray. Uncle Trig and the other men removed their hats. Pastor Havoc bowed his head, and the crowd quieted. For a small man, he had a big voice, and the water helped carry it over the docks. Hobie stood there uncertainly a moment after the prayer finished. He didn't want to do the wrong thing. Up you go, boy. Pastor Havoc waved his hand, and Hobie scrambled across the gangplank to the boat's deck. He clipped the flag on the lines and hoisted it up, up, up. When it bumped at the top of the pole, the crowd cheered. His hands ached from the cold, but Hobie felt warm inside. If only Dad's was one of the faces there on the dock. He made his way back across the gangplank and leapfrogged to the dock. Good job, Hobie. Uncle Trig shook his hand and then pointed to the flag. When the season's over, we'll send that to your dad, he said. You might be home before then, Hobie said. Right you are, Uncle Trig tugged on the brim of his hat. There's always hope with a line in the water, he said. Before Hobie could figure out what that meant, Emil grabbed his arm. Race you to the end of the dock. Hobie tore off after his cousins, and three of them dodging this way and that through the departing crowd. At Uncle Trig's, the cousins played a rousing game of Chinese checkers. June won, while the adults drank coffee and talked. Aunt Ellen's butterscotch pie almost made up for not being able to work on his model plane. Then They came home to find an envelope wedged between the screen door, delivered to my house by mistake, was penciled on the front. Hobie's heart jumped. When he saw it was addressed to him from Camp Lejeune, he ran to his room to read it. Dear Hobie, I am wagging my tail because Marv and I passed our training with flying colors. I've never doubted that I'd pass, but Marv was another question altogether. The hardest thing for me, not Marv, was learning not to bark, especially during field exercises. Your pal Duke. P.S. Corf here. I don't have a little sister, but if I did, I hope I could be the kind of big brother you are. I hate to break a kid's heart, but Duke and I are a team now. I promise I will bring Duke back to you and your sister as soon as I can. Hobie crumpled the letter and tossed it in the waste bin. His plan hadn't worked. Now, what was he going to do to get Duke back? All right, you guys, that was chapter 7. See you tomorrow.